Hi there, my name is Donnie Matlock. I work as a business strategist for MITRE Corporation in the Enterprise Strategy and Transformation Innovation Center.
And hi, I'm Christine Cordes. I also work for MITRE. I'm the business performance leader for the Enterprise Strategy and Transformation Innovation Center.
We're really excited to talk to you today about some of our research on the role of trust in a successful partnership. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve? Well, let me set the stage a little bit by talking about how space grew up. It grew up primarily as a monopoly, reacting to its environment. It was an organic upbringing. But this is changing now. It's transitioning from a monopoly to an open market, where the commercial side is taking on a greater role in the space industry. We're seeing more disruptive technologies and integrated solutions across these sectors. And there's a need for companies to come together to focus on those mission outcomes more than ever. So what's the result? Well, the result is that there are more partnerships, particularly cooperative partnerships, that are required in order for these organizations and for these companies to really achieve their mission outcomes. This isn't by itself the only thing we're talking about. We're talking about trust, because trust is critical for these cooperative partnerships to be successful.
So Donnie talks a little bit about cooperative partnerships. Let me give you a definition. So a cooperative partnership is a specific type of inter-firm relationship or strategic alliance where two or more actors are simultaneously involved in cooperative and competitive interactions. It stems from game theory, and it basically says we're going from a situation in which there is a winner and a loser to a relationship where we both win.
And in the context of our trends, what we're seeing is that there's an increasing consumer reliance on that space-based infrastructure. That's why we're seeing that transition from the monopoly to the commercial side. It's because of this reliance on the space-based infrastructure that we're seeing the pressure to provide those technological services that require that new and innovative tech in orbit, particularly lower Earth orbit. And that's why we're seeing the proliferation of lower Earth orbit. And with this comes the need for suppliers to also think differently about their offerings.
Donnie, that's right. And I think that this is very similar to other high-end tech industries where we see a lot of cooperative partnerships. These dynamics are leading us in the same direction here. So we see more industry players need to find that synergy to support a fully integrated system. And more competitors will need to work more closely together for those shared mission-driven outcomes, rather than just the financial ones. So cooperative partnerships, which we've defined previously, require trust, basically so that you're optimizing contributions from each firm and minimizing those transaction costs. There's a lot of definitions of inter-firm trust. A few of them are here. My favorite, boil it down to its basics, is that trust is that I believe you can help me and also that you will help me.
So in the context of cooperative partnerships, what does this look like? Why is trust different for cooperative partnerships as opposed to any other inter-firm partnership? Well, will you help me and can you help me is a really important part of that. In addition, though, we're seeing that there are really distinct differences between cooperative partnerships and those traditional inter-firm partnerships. The first is that there's a rivalry between these two organizations or between these partners. So the rivalry tends to get in the way of building those interpersonal relationships. The rivalry also gets in the way of capturing and taking ownership of those outcomes. And thirdly, there's protection of intellectual property that becomes a risk.
And these risks are real, but they're balanced out by the tremendous strategic value that you can capture by engaging in one of these types of partnerships. So some of the things that we found in our research is that attaining that strategic value really depends on whether the partners and its members do three things. One is that each member is contributing to the individual member's strategic ends. Again, we don't want winners and losers. We want everybody to win. The second is that the sort of division of labor, right? The whole purpose of the relationship is to tackle a problem that neither could do individually. And so ensuring that you have the right strengths and weaknesses in the membership is really important. And then I think the last is the most important, which is the individual members enter into this relationship with intention, eyes wide open, and a clear understanding of what they expect to achieve in the partnership and the cost they expect to contribute to the relationship.
I agree, Christine. I think that probably is the most important one. And it's certainly one that we see in one of our critical success factors. As part of our research, we identified 8 critical success factors to help these cooperative partnerships be successful. Let's talk a little bit about them now.
So here are the results of our research. You see in the middle column here the 8 critical success factors that we found after reviewing numerous research studies. We actually put them in context to MITRE's strategic framework. When we looked at the 8 critical success factors most common in the research, they all pertain to a specific type of strategic management decision making. And we thought that it would help with the context if we used our framework to define them. Let's look at that framework now. I'm sure that those of you in the audience have seen numerous examples of a strategic management framework. The basic components of strategic planning, investment selection and prioritization, execution and operations, performance management, and holding it all together, a really strong governance framework. These decision making processes are within the context of usually pretty dynamic environmental conditions.
Let's talk a little bit about those environmental conditions, because I think that context really sets the stage for the cooperative partnership and also for our critical success factors. One of the things that our research shows is that the areas of competition have to be carefully managed. This goes back to talking about that intentionality that the partnership has to have when you go into it. The second is that the industry players are physically close. They're co-located or show up in person. I will say that this research was done before COVID-19 and before the pandemic, and so I'm sure there'll be new research that comes out soon. But the literature tends to tell us now that the more physically close and co-located the organizations tend to be, and the industry players tend to be, the more successful the partnership. Thirdly, the industry players are from similar industries and aim to solve similar problems. This is a big part of the cooperative partnership. It is one of the distinguishing factors that separates it from any other traditional interfirm partnership. So let's talk a little bit more about that intentionality, because intentionality means that there has to be really strong governance. And the governance piece shows 3 critical success factors. That the partnership is contractually governed to protect that privacy and intellectual property. This is a huge risk and it's a huge concern for most companies. The second is that the partnership is structured for shared decision making. This is throughout. We don't want one organization making decisions for the whole partnership. There needs to be shared decision making across all partners. And the third is that the partnership is organized or facilitated by a trusted third party. Now, this is a recommended step. This is not a requirement. But it is worth saying that organizations or partnerships that have a trusted third party to moderate and mediate and to facilitate meetings and interactions between the partners, and also the data collection and the other things that go along with that partnership, are more successful.
Donnie, it just sounds to me the old adage is true. Good fences make good neighbors. If we go to the next slide, we're looking at now strategic planning and performance management. And you'll hear us use the phrase 2 sides of the same coin. I think that when you set your direction and your priorities, it's also important to set how you expect to hold each other accountable for these intentions and priorities. And one of the key critical success factors that we found was that partnerships hold members accountable by measuring progress and communicating performance to its members. More than just accountability, though, this kind of strong feedback loop helps all members be part of iterative decision making to continuously try to optimize against that dynamic environment we were talking about earlier.
The second half of the model looks at that investment selection and that execution and operation. Same thing. We talk about them as 2 sides of the same coin. Investment selection is really about the prioritization and the selection of those investments. And what do we talk about when we talk about investments? Well, we're really talking about those activities that you identify as part of your strategic planning process. Anytime you make a decision about what activity to pursue in your strategic planning process, it's going to have effects down the road in terms of how you allocate your time, your money, and your people. The execution and operation is not just the execution. It's also about the monitoring, and it really focuses on those individual behaviors that are required of those partnerships for those partnerships to be successful. One of the critical success factors that came out of our research is that the partnership requires relevant knowledge and data to flow freely between its members. This means that there has to be a behavior change in order for the partnership to work. It's not enough to say that the partnership is going to be a partnership. You have to actually engage in the partnership. You have to participate in the partnership, and that comes sometimes with a cost. And that has to be factored into both your investment selection and also your decision on whether or not to enter into the partnership.
You know, when I think about these 8 critical success factors and the research that we did for this presentation, it gets me very excited about where we go next. And when I look at some of the really successful cooperative partnerships that we're aware of, they're here on this slide, are 4 examples of that. I think it would be a great next step to take these 8 critical success factors and do more analysis about how they show up in practice in some of these areas, specifically around space ISAC, or maybe even MITRE's own SIAS relationship. I do think that when I see these examples, one thing that strikes me is how many of them are based on information and data sharing for various mission outcomes. I think that that's a real key area of future research.
In terms of future research, I think it's worth adding that not all of these partnerships are the same in terms of their structure. The SIAS is where MITRE acts as a trusted third party between industry players and the government. It's not the same for the Space Data Association or for the Space ISAC. So it is an interesting idea to look at these different critical success factors in the context of those different organizations, because I think that they will show different results.
I think it would be a great next step. So in conclusion, I think what we tried to do here today is give you the initial definitions of cooperative partnerships and trust within cooperative partnerships, while also identifying those 8 critical success factors. I think that we note that these types of strategic alliances that are based on cooperative partnerships will continue to be prevalent in this particular domain of space.
Thank you so much for listening to our presentation on the role of trust in partnerships. And we really look forward to your questions in the interactive Q&A.
Thank you.